Guys, welcome to the Tim Moen Show. Thanks for joining me. It's been a hot second since I've been on the mic here, but I'm trying to get my stuff together, guys. Yeah, in my last podcast episode, I talked to my friend Lisa. We were talking about doing this self-improvement program, 75 Hard, where we spend 75 days doing 2-a-day workouts, reading, drinking water, eliminating all vice from our life. No, not even a drop of alcohol has touched these lips in over 2 weeks because of this. And in the vein of self-improvement, I'm bringing on a guest that I'm hoping selfishly can guide me here, because I made a lot of bad life decisions, a lot of bad financial decisions. I expected to be retired by the age of 40. I'm 50, and I'm now looking at, hopefully retiring by the time I'm 90. Maybe my next guest here, Tony, can get me on track. Tony, welcome to the Tim Moen Show. Tony is the author of Freedom at Risk, a great book about getting your personal finances on track, protecting your freedom that way. And he does a great job of showing how all these different forces in society are working. Education, government, economics, this society in general, and the kind of the cultural narrative. Tony, thanks for joining me. Appreciate
Tim,
you.
thanks for having me on. I appreciate this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. So you go by the Dirty Boots Capitalist. Why Dirty Boots Capitalist, Tony?
Yeah. So I'm one of those guys who believes on boots on the ground, getting your boots dirty, and actually walking through. Not just like from a real estate perspective. I love going on to construction sites and looking at buildings, getting my boots dirty on the ground, looking at that firsthand. But it goes beyond that, right? For me now, helping people get into real estate, it's beyond just going on site and getting your boots dirty, looking at the property. It's also walking through financial statements. It's also getting your boots dirty, walking through demographics and migration patterns. There's so much more to it today because our world is so much more complex today and so much more manipulated today that we have to understand all those different forces. Right. And to do that, we need to get our boots dirty in so many different ways. So yeah, that's where Dirty Boots came into play. But capital, I want to share with folks for your audience, capital is more than just money. I have so many folks who come to me, who say, gee, Tony, I can't get into real estate because I don't have capital. I don't have money to get into real estate. And I'm like, well, what do you do? And somebody might be a contractor, somebody may be a real estate agent. And I'm like, that's capital right there. Knowing, having the knowledge between your ears to be able to fix things, renovate things, know what the trends are, know what the real estate market is doing. That is capital. And for somebody who has the money, but doesn't have that particular capital that you bring to the table, that knows how to fix things, plumbing, electrical, whatever it is, they would love to partner with somebody like that and put their hard-earned money to work with the capital you bring to the table. So that's where I try to open up people's mind to a different vision of things.
Yeah, I love that. Getting your boots dirty, getting right in there. That's kind of been my MO as well. I got into real estate when I bought I guess it would be my second house. I actually built it myself. I looked around me and I'm like, okay, I want a specific type of house for my family. I'm going to hire a contractor to build it. But then I looked at my area and there was a housing boom going on, and it was going to take a couple of years to get contractors to build the house I wanted. So I'm just like, well, shoot, there's YouTube and there's knowledge out there. I should be able to figure this out myself. These guys don't look like they're rocket scientists. I feel like I'm as smart as them. So I just figured it out, and I built the house from the foundation, the footings all the way up. And, I electrocuted myself about 6 times trying to figure out the electric, but, we learn, I didn't
That's
die.
right.
So I learned. So I love that idea of getting involved, because quite often, today everything's abstract, right? It exists online in social media, and we have all this information flying at us all the time. And like you said, it's a super complex world out there. We have stuff going on in the Middle East right now. We've got Russia, Ukraine. We've got money printing going on, and just out of control inflation at the same time. We have central banks jacking up interest rates, and that worrying homeowners. And so, a guy like me who lives in the abstract constantly, because I come from the background of ideas, and trying to convey ideas, and running for office and different things like that is all about ideas and abstractions that kind of undergird our Western civilization, and they're important. But you get too wrapped up in your head, Tony, and so
Yeah.
you're in house ownership, and okay, we locked in at a low interest rate. That's good, but inflation's going up. They're jacking up the
Yeah.
interest rates. We're trying to balance all this stuff, and you're like, well, um, maybe you know, we'll get hyperinflation, and then how does that affect what I'm doing with my house? So it's how do you
Yeah.
how do you, Tony, advise people to kind of find their center and navigate through all this overload?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, you just shared so much there. So many different dynamics in a matter of, less than 60 seconds. So many different dynamics that's happening, not just in the world, but also in people's personal lives. And there's a lot of there's a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of paralysis there. What should I do? How should I do it? I don't know how to do it. And the media doesn't help, right? The media just stirs the pot. The politicians just stir the pot. Um, yeah, so it's really confusing, and there's no like one size fits all solution. That I, so to speak, can provide, other than you know I don't leave it to the government to solve my problems, right? The government
Right.
isn't going to come and solve our problems. If anything, they're just going to create more problems for us. And I think we've really seen it over the last 3 years. So I don't really put any stock in that. I put more stock in people who are educators, people who are teaching things that I have either an interest in, or that can help me in some way based on my interests. So my interests are, to a large degree in real estate. So I hang with a very good, very knowledgeable real estate crowd, not only through like masterminds I belong to, but also I watch their YouTube videos, and they give a lot of education that help me personally. Now that's just
Right.
me. For others, I would share things like, if you already have a business or you want to be an entrepreneur of some sort, go seek out those masterminds, those meetups where you can be with your community. And this is something we talk a lot about, is creating a community or joining a community, right? Where you
Mm.
belong with like-minded people, entrepreneurs, business people. If you're into stocks and, doing puts and calls and all sorts of investments like that, join a community that can make you smarter, stronger, faster, right? Learn
Right.
from each other, learn from that community, right? Don't leave it to government, don't leave it to the education system. We know they're not strong, either one of those. We need to take it upon ourselves to go seek out that learning. So I like masterminds. I like YouTube. I like, just fostering a community around myself, locally and just across the country. So those are some
Okay.
ideas, but it all comes down to what are you searching for? What are you trying to build? What are you trying to get smarter at? I know folks who do homeschooling because they believe so much in, raising their kids a certain way and educating them right these days, as opposed to what the education system is teaching these days. And I know that's a big hot button. And so for them, their family is super important for them. And so they're big into homeschooling, and they belong to the groups and the clubs, and
Mm.
they create a community around that. So God bless them. That's great for them. I try to foster that and just try to pack on a little bit more support and systems to help them. So
Yeah. So Tony, you managed to retire at age 44, which was
yeah,
phenomenal. Walk us through how you made that happen. So you just kind of
yeah,
talked about finding something you're passionate about, you're interested about. Surround yourself with a community of like-minded folks that can elevate your game and keep you
yeah,
going. Is
yeah,
that kind of the process you use? Like how did you get started in this early retirement
yeah.
thing?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Tim, because, I don't just, come on shows like yours and pontificate about things, or just like imagineer this stuff. I mean, I talk the talk, I walk the line.
You got dirty
I
boots, Tony. Hey,
so I can speak about it, and I can share. My story is a very simple one, and it's going to resonate with a lot of your audience out there. So I'll just bear with me here a little bit, and I'll get to how I retired. But I'm the product of immigrant parents, right? My parents immigrated to the U.S. of A. with a pocket full of change and a lot of hope and opportunity in front of them, right? They didn't have a lot. So they immigrated here. I'm one of four children, and all of us were raised on based on our parents. We were told, go to school, get a good education, you'll get a good job, and you'll be taken care of for life.
yeah,
Because that's what they knew, and that was their world, right? My parents, probably like your parents, they probably worked in the same job for 30, 40 years, and then they retired. That's what my parents did, and that's all they knew. But so I did just that. I went to school, I got a great education. I have a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering, and I have my MBA, two pretty good degrees, I would think, right?
yeah.
So I got a great education. I got a great job at a tech company. And then shortly thereafter, I got laid off. And
Mm,
I was like, wait a minute, this wasn't part of the plan,
no,
right? This wasn't part in that mantra wasn't anywhere in there that I was going to get laid off. So um so I wasn't financially independent at that time. I couldn't support myself. I had some money in the bank, fortunately, but otherwise that was going to eventually run out. So I had to get another job, right? Which a lot of
right.
folks have. And
Yeah,
again, they can resonate with that, that aspect. So I had to get another job, but during that time, I had this realization like, I don't want to tie my financial future solely to a job, into a company, not knowing whether there's going to be loyalty there. In fact, loyalty on either end, either loyalty from the employer with the employee or the employee with the employer. Today, there's much, much less loyalty on both sides than there
mhm,
was, say, 30, 40 years ago. Much less loyalty. So
absolutely.
I said, okay, um, to get me to that financial freedom, that independence, I needed to do something different. And I knew enough about, fixing things around the house. Again, I grew up with immigrant parents that, they didn't hire out fixing things. They fixed it themselves. And I was the helper. I was go
Right.
get this tool or that tool
Yeah.
or help with this, right? So I had learned some growing up working with my father. So I was handy enough. So long story short, that's what, kind of inspired me to get into real estate because I did know some of that how to already. So I
Right.
bought my first building. And some people think, "Oh my God, you're in real estate, you retired at 44. You must have got, you must have bought like, 100 units or something like that." Not so. I started with a very small 4-unit building.
Mm,
Something very simple that a lot of people can start with. And I hope this inspires folks to, not feel like to get there you have to start in a huge way. Start small,
right.
buy a condo, that's cash flowing. Buy a single family home, that's cash flowing. A couple $100 a month or something, right? We always want it to cash flow. So I bought a 4-unit building. It was cash flowing, doing well. I continued my education, buying books, going to some seminars, speaking with some friends of mine. My community, again, going
Yeah.
back to my community that I knew was in real estate, educators people who have done it, and I could see I wanted to be more like them, so I followed their path. um so yeah, after that I bought a duplex, and then I bought a triplex. I bought a lot of small buildings, and then eventually I had enough small buildings that anybody can go off and buy, to be able to that replaced my income. It was enough to cover all my expenses, right? That income from real estate was able to cover all my expenses. So I was cash flow positive at the end of the day. And at 44, I had that decision of, do I want to stay working in the corporate world, which was a great job, a very hard decision to leave that. But the real estate component just provided me so many more freedoms
Mm,
in my life, and so much more opportunity, that I had to go in that direction. And
Right.
because of that, I mean, that's the reason why being able to, take some of those chances and do that, that boots on the ground, philosophy, I was able to retire, and now I'm doing all sorts of, amazing things that I never thought I'd be doing. Like
Right.
writing a book. You
Yeah.
mentioned that, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I never thought I was going to write a book, right? And maybe many of your audience listeners here, maybe they thought they would never write a book. But you know what? If you have it in you, if you have it to educate folks and help people, why not? It's so
Yeah.
accessible today.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put a link to your webpage in that book below, folks. Just look down in the show notes for a link to that. I highly recommend it. I'm about halfway through and I'm picking up lots of great things right now. Okay. A lot of my audience, including myself, are convinced we need to do something. We need to get control of our finances. We can't leave this. I even look at my daughters, and they're paramedics. They're in the kind of following in the same profession I'm in, and unfortunately, in my province, in a country
Mhm.
where healthcare is universal, uh, we we have one employer, and that employer
Mm.
sucks, Tony. It's a
Yeah.
terribly
Mm.
toxic environment. I mean, and so it's not a matter of it's kind of a forced loyalty. It's a one-way loyalty. We have to be loyal to the employer. They don't have
Mm.
to have any loyalty whatsoever to us. It's like the worst situation you can be in. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at my kids going, man, I see the struggles they're going through dealing with the employer. And I'm like, okay, how do I advise them going forward here? Like, I haven't made good financial decisions myself. I'm terrible with money. I cashed in my pension to run for prime minister in 2015. And, that was, I don't really have any regrets. That's a life experience that,
Mm.
I wouldn't want to trade, but it has made me realize, okay, now, I can't just rely on my employer
Yeah.
bankrolling my retirement anymore. I started all over again in my profession as a probationary firefighter in my mid 40s,
Mm.
with all the young guys just starting their careers, and that's kind of where I'm at. I love my job, but I know that I'm not going to be able to kick in doors and hump hoses around
Yeah.
for much longer. So,
Yeah.
so what can a person
Yeah.
without a lot of money, without a big nest egg,
Yeah.
maybe, and especially right now, just struggling paycheck to paycheck just to put food on the table, how can they get
Yeah.
money working for them rather than working for money all the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. I get it quite often,
Yeah.
actually, because not everybody is into real estate like I am, and that's okay. You don't have to be. There's other things you can do, and I'm going to share a couple of stories. So I have a couple of friends who were in very similar situations, like you're describing, right? Working a job, trying to get ahead, trying to make a little extra coin, put it away for retirement or for a vacation, whatever it is, right? I had a friend, he's a police officer, and, he sees society each and every day, the good and the bad. He sees break ins into cars, into houses, drugs, whatever it is. Um, so he and I were talking one day, and he was talking about starting up his own home security business, right? And I said, "Wow, that's a great idea, right?" And so, we kind of hashed it through, talking a little bit more about it. And so now he goes into homes to evaluate a person's home, where they might need extra locks, which locks to use, how to fortify windows and doors, where to put security cameras, where to put decals, different things. Now, he's a police officer. How much authority do you think he brings to the table as a police officer who sees this crime each and every day?
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a huge, feather in his cap in terms of somebody calling him. I would much rather call him and say, "Hey, come do an evaluation on my home. I'll pay you $100 to do an evaluation, and then you tell me what I need to do." Okay. So it doesn't cost him anything in terms of startup. He doesn't have any inventory or any, real,
Right.
costs. So he starts that up, tells people what needs to do. And oh, by the way, he's connected with an electrician, people who, after he does his evaluation, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'll go buy that, whatever it is, $2,000 system, $5,000 security set, whatever it is." He then turns that work over to his installer, right? Who
Right.
installs it during the day while he's working his beat
Mm,
as a police officer, right? And he gets a cut of that. Whatever he gets, I don't know what he gets, but he gets a cut of that for making that sale.
right.
So he's creating this business for himself because he's the same way as you. He's kind of like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this job for the rest of my life, running around after these knuckleheads. I'm not going to be able to do that for into late into retirement. So he's looking at it saying, I got to create something else for myself. Now, that's one example. I have another friend who was in the military, the U.S. military, lifelong military guy. He's been overseas. He's seen war. He's seen so much devastation, right? Now, what he does here in this country, he's created a business for himself to help people be more self sustaining in terms of if there are power outages, if there's a storm, if there's some sort of event, what do you need to have in place? How do you protect your perimeter, right? So, do you need cameras on your perimeter? What do you have for a water supply, right? Maybe
Mm,
we should, prepare you to have a certain water supply. What do you have for food on site? What do you have for if the banking system goes down? How do you prepare for that? Because he's seen it overseas. People be saying, and all they have is like 2 shekels, right? And they're like,
right.
how do I pay for my food, right? He
Mm,
helps people kind of create that starter kit to help them, and now's the time to do it, right? Because some of this stuff takes, it takes years to put in place. You may not have the resources to put everything in place today, but over 3 years, you put a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And so he's created this business where he's really helped people have this self-sufficiency and not depend on the government to come save you every single time,
yeah.
right? Which I
Yeah.
love. And I know you love that too, right? As
Right.
libertarians, I
Absolutely.
mean, less government is better government in my eyes.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? You speak a little bit. A lot of us libertarians spend a lot of time focused on things that are outside our control. Government's bad. There's all these
yeah,
forces. It seems like the apocalypse is inevitable at this point, and yet we can't seem to do anything about it. But the thing we can do, and one of the things I've done, over the past few years, is shift gears to focus on more on things that are within my control. I think we still need to be aware of politics and try to
yeah,
influence that landscape to the degree we can. But I think
yeah,
libertarians have this problem with balancing that focus with, hey, let's focus on things you can actually control that will actually
yeah,
tangibly increase your liberty right here and now in this moment and in the coming years ahead, despite all the bad things government's going to do that we can't
yeah,
control. um, you're an expert at you're expert. I love what you talked about, and those stories are so great because they basically speak to this idea of, hey, look at where your interests are, look
yeah,
at what your, as I think Scott Adams talks about, having a talent stack, right? What are your talents, and
yeah,
let's stack those up and find that
yeah,
niche where all those talents you have kind of
yeah,
align. The military guy being able to prepare people for survival situations, the cop being able to talk about home
yeah,
security because he's got those talents. What are your talents? It sounds like you kind of did the same thing.
yeah,
I suspect there's a lot of folks, because we all have some interest in real estate. I mean, certainly, first of all, young people I know are having a harder and harder time
mm,
getting
yeah.
their own primary residence, right? So maybe can you talk a little bit about some of the forces going on that are really contributing to what you call a renter nation?
Yeah, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I chat a lot about how the next generation is gonna. This will be the first time where I'm looking at history and looking at the future, where this is going to be the first time where the next generation is very quite possibly going to have it harder than we've had it, right? Uh, in the past, every generation has wanted better for their kids, uh, and they achieved it. Each generation had, better and better and better. I think this is the first time where that next generation, those millennials, some of the millennials and the Gen Z are going to have it worse, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's not their fault. It's just the way things are constructed. Back in the day, y- when my parents and your parents started out, they got married, they eventually bought a house because that was their investment. Their investment was investing in buying a house and putting their money towards that. And that's just what they did during that time, right? Today, these kids, these young people, their investment is being pushed into college education.
Mm,
And that's not their fault. That's just what they're taught and fed, and what's built around them is go to school, get an education, right? Pay for college, get student loans. That's their investment is in college. That's where their money goes to a large degree. So
right.
when they start, they don't
And
really
Tony,
have that.
as you and I know, college education has vastly outstripped the rate of inflation in terms of
Yeah.
how much it affects your bottom line. I mean,
Yeah.
when you give kids money at almost no, first of all, everyone is approved for credit, no matter how risky you
Yep.
are, and you get it at such a low rate, and you can never be absolved of that debt. You can never declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
I mean, that those factors obviously drive up the cost
Yeah.
of education. And so now you're right. And what do we tell kids? We've always told them, go to college, get a good job, right?
Yeah.
And so what we've done is harness them with a huge debt
Yeah.
that all the good intentions behind that suite of policies
Yeah.
has led to shackling them
Yeah.
with debt. So sorry, I just wanted
Yeah,
to add
no,
that
no,
in.
no, no, and so that's just, kind of, I don't wanna say it's their fault, it's not their fault, it's just what is today, right?
Right.
So we agree on that, but, upon coming out of school, out of college, getting a job, I share with folks instead of, and some of this is personal sacrifice too,
Hmm.
which to retire at 44, I took personal sacrifice, right?
Sure.
While I was working, again, just a side note, side story here, because I think it's important for folks to hear some of these side stories because it's real. This was real life, right? I didn't get to retire at 44 because, somebody gave it to me. I went after it. So I was working my day job, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. typically. But there was a stint where I was building spec homes
Mm.
myself. I bought the land, put in the foundation, build up put the sticks in place, put the floor, right? The whole bit. And so I was doing that. Where did I find the time? I tell people there were days at 3 a.m. in the morning, I was at that spec home installing wood floor,
Wow.
right? 6 a.m., I'd go, take a rag, wash all the, sawdust off of me, clean up a bit, right? Put on my work shirt, my work pants on the construction site, right?
Yeah.
Go to work for the next, 8 to 10 hours. After that, I come back to the construction site, turn the
Yeah.
compressor on, turn the nail guns back on, and off I go. I'm installing wood floors, for the next, 3, 4 hours. I did it because I had to. There was a personal sacrifice. So
Right.
today, what I share with folks is, yes, coming out of school, you might have a little bit of money in your pocket. You hear the media buying a home, buying a home. You know what? Instead of buying a single family home, buy a duplex, buy a
Mm.
triplex, right? Something that is gonna also generate income for you so you can help pay the mortgage. Maybe it doesn't pay
Right.
the entire mortgage, but it generates something for you. So yes, everybody wants the single family home with the white picket fence and the big backyard for the dog and the kid and I get it. But upon starting out, start with something like that that's actually going to pay you something each and every month, right?
Mm.
If you can't do something like that, do what's called house hacking, right? Where, okay, so you buy a single family home, but you have 1 or 2 extra bedrooms, right? Rent out those 1 or 2 extra bedrooms.
Yeah.
I know people who have done that, right? Again, you're not going to make a killing, but it's something to give you some additional cash flow, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're a handy person, um, and you happen to buy a single family home, or you have a single family home, go to your town and try to figure out if you can add what's called an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU. I suspect you folks in Canada also have that as well, right? Where you can
Yeah.
add an extra unit onto your single family residence. And now it's like an in-law apartment you can rent out for income each and every month, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's 3 ideas that young people can go off and do. It's a very doable thing. There's some personal sacrifice in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't deny it. But, you know,
Yeah. I
you
prefer to use the term, it's a trade, right? You're trading short-term gratification for long-term gratification for more
right.
sustainable. But let me ask you this, because one of the things that come to mind are, Tony, were you married at this time? How did you get buy-in from in terms of your personal relationships? Because obviously there's some sacrifices that have to go on there. And you know, one thing I've learned is you need your significant other to be on board with a lot of these harebrained schemes. At least in my life, I've had to have that. What do you got any tips or tricks, or how did you navigate those waters?
My biggest tip is make sure your partner and you are aligned. So
Right.
important that your goals and your vision is
Right.
aligned.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, when I got started, I didn't understand that well enough, and our goals, our vision weren't aligned, and that resulted in divorce.
Mm,
But I am in a very great, successful relationship right now. Our belief system, our values are very much aligned. We support each other. I mean, there's
yeah.
that I go and I speak across country. I bring my my girlfriend with me. We have a great time. We stay in nice places. Typically, these conferences are in nice places, so we stay there. You know, and so there's such a good support network there. You know,
Yeah.
I tell a funny story where we wake up pretty early. Sally and myself, we wake up pretty early, and so many times we're up at like 5 a.m. We're watching the news or hearing some stories from overnight, and we'll be having conversations at 5 a.m. about communism
Mm,
or some
nice.
other debate like that.
Yeah.
And that just reinforces that we're aligned. We have the same sort of belief system. We're inquisitive, just
Right.
naturally inquisitive, and we're always both of us we're testing where truth lies.
Mm,
Because with the media, with the politicians, with what you don't know where truth is. It's obscured. So you have to have these kind of critical thinking conversations back and forth to try to figure that out. And right now, me and my partner, we're totally aligned.
right.
And that's one of the biggest things I would share with young people or folks who are starting out, going into doing any big thing, whether it's starting your own business as an entrepreneur or going into real estate, whatever it is. Make sure your goals are aligned. Super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's worth having conversations about about your values, where you want to go as a couple, right? It's like, okay, we can afford to go on 2 tropical vacations this year, or we could downgrade to 1 and get a rental place and focus on
Yeah.
our early retirement. What do we think as a couple should be our
Yeah.
goal, right?
Yeah.
And you know, coming back to those long-term goals, you know, at least quarterly, talking with your spouse. How are we on track? Is our spending habits following our the values that we espouse and subscribe to? I think that's so
Yeah.
important. Okay, I think I kind of sidetracked you there a little bit, but could you talk a little bit about? So I guess the main thing that's creating, I guess, an opportunity in the rental market. We could look at it as negative, right? There's not as
Mhm.
much home ownership, or it's more difficult. But what is the opportunity there that for real estate investors, that there's so many renters now? What does the horizon look like in real estate investing?
So today, with the high interest rates, with the housing prices being where they are, um, it can be difficult to buy property that is going to cash flow on day one.
Right.
That's just a reality. I don't think that's any shocking revelation here on your show. But where there is opportunity is if you're willing to be more of a passive real estate investor, it's investing in syndications. And, you
Hmm.
know, it's for some people and it's not for other people. But the thing with real estate syndications, and a real estate syndication is nothing more than a bunch of people getting together, pooling their money together to be able to go off and buy a piece of real estate. That's all it is. Bunch of
Hmm.
people, a community coming together, pooling their money together to go off and buy a big piece of real estate they ordinarily wouldn't be able to buy. And so what that does is it gives you more leverage as an investor, because you may be new to the real estate game and you may not know fully all the rules of real estate and how to do real estate well. But if you're pooled in a community with others, there's going to be others who take the lead, who know how to invest, who know how to negotiate contracts, who know how to select the right property managers, who know how to negotiate insurance contracts, who know on and on and on, right?
Right.
So that's one of the benefits of being in a real estate syndication is you get all
Okay.
that expertise without necessarily bringing it yourself. The other thing is you're coming along for that ride and you're learning. You're
Right.
getting an education. Not only are you investing and cash flowing from that syndication, you're also participating. You're in these meetings, you're learning, you're talking to folks. How does this work? Why did that happen? What should we do? You know, talking about maybe value add projects. Why should we do that or why shouldn't we do that? What's happening in the market, right? So you're also getting this great education along the way, which I think is fantastic. So
Right.
that's a little bit about syndication, just to kind of put that in people's ear. But I also want to mention, I think folks have a um uh a misconception of hard money lenders, right? So for folks who may not have the full down payment to go buy an investment property themselves, say a triple decker or a duplex, you don't have it at all. You can go to a hard money lender, and some folks will say, "Oh, I don't want to go to them. If I don't pay them back, they're going to break my kneecaps." Or no, 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 it doesn't work like that. Um, the thing that is so great with hard money lenders is they're experienced. So if you are new to the real estate game, not only can they provide you with some amount of that down payment to do the investment you want to do, but they also bring experience. They are not going to lend their money to somebody, to some project
Right.
that the numbers aren't going to work. So if you are not
Hmm.
experienced, they're going to run through the numbers. They're going to make sure that the property cash flows well enough to make sure they get their money back.
Right.
So
Right.
they're going to be looking at their best interests, which,
Yeah.
as a result, you're going to get the dividends of the goodness they bring to the table on analyzing that deal. They'll say, we're not going to invest in this deal. And if they don't invest in it, you shouldn't either. So,
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So money lenders, I guess, what would they'd be like a private mortgage company or something like that?
yeah,
Or yeah. Okay. So I could totally see there being opportunities in that marketplace for a hard money lender, because a lot of times you go to the bank and it's kind of just a check sheet, right? Just a generic. They're looking at your credit rating. They're looking at they have certain things, and the mortgage advisor, whatever you're sitting down with at the bank, is it's not their money, so
yeah,
they're going to be very conservative, and they're not incentivized to do the extra work to see
yeah,
if you're a really good fit for their money or not. Whereas
yeah,
these guys, they look, hey, well, me as an example, I'm a little leery of real estate. I've had bad experience. I at the same time I cashed in my retirement pension, Tony, I had a rental property in a community called Fort McMurray, which was struck by a wildfire. The whole town evacuated, thousands of homes burned, devastated the community. Mine was one of the houses that got damaged in the fire. And my property mortgage was already underwater because my renters were not paying me. So I was going through a process there, and then I had huge delays with insurance. So I ended up having it foreclosed on me. And so now I'm in a position where I want to buy a home again, and banks are looking at me like, oh, you have a foreclosure. You're not a good, but it was private money lenders that were like, or these hard money guys that would say, oh no, you've got a good record. This was kind of acts of God and bad things.
A one-off.
It's a one-off thing. And so we can trust you again. So I totally see where that hard money thing comes in. But talk to me a little bit, Tony, about syndication, because now that appeals to me more than going it alone. It's like, okay, I have some weaknesses. I did this personality test, Tony, Jordan Peterson, Understand Myself. And to my despair and embarrassment, I scored like 0 on conscientiousness, right? Dotting I's and crossing T's and attention to detail, keeping books, all those things are way outside my wheelhouse. I have no interest in it, and it shows. But you need that in order to protect your bottom line. And so any endeavors where I've been successful, I've always outsourced conscientiousness. I've always had a partner who was good at the things I was bad at, and I was able to be the creative, open-minded, looking at opportunities guy while they were protecting my back end.
Sure.
So I can see that being a benefit going the syndication route. How do you get involved in a syndication? Do you start one yourself? Talk me through that. How do I? Sure.
So I have my own syndication where we do deals with others, but I'm not here. I don't want it to be like a sales pitch. I'm not here to sell anybody on anything. I'm truly here to just help people. And that's really all I want to do. So what I would share with people is, don't invest in the first syndication you come by. Maybe seek out a few of them. There's a lot of folks that, will come to me, and I don't even, so to speak, take them into my syndication, maybe because I don't have a deal or something like that. I have like 3 or 4 other syndicators that I know of, that I trust, that I appreciate what they're doing and their knowledge and what they bring to the table. I send these folks over to those syndicators, right? Because they're not all syndications are created equal either, right? So from the standpoint of, some will purchase a property that cash flows on day one, and that may make sense for you as an investor. You want a cash flow on day one. Perfect. That's okay. Some syndications may not cash flow on day one, but they provide an excellent tax advantage in terms of what we call a cost segregation study, where we do accelerated depreciation on the asset. And so we get a big negative return to be able to offset our positive cash that we received that year, right? So for example, the last couple of years, I haven't paid any federal tax because I use this accelerated depreciation technique through syndication to provide me with this negative return to offset my positive return. So now I don't pay any federal tax, which is great. And so that means something to some people, but not everybody. So there's different aspects of syndication. Another aspect is, some people don't care about either depreciation or don't care about cash flow on day one. They just want to put their money in a safe place where it's going to appreciate over the next 10 years. So there may be some syndicators who purchase a building, know that over the next 5 years, they're going to do some what's called value add, where they renovate the apartments. They'll go through and renovate all the apartments, take it from, say, a class C building and bring it up to like a class B plus building. And so with that, over 5-10 years, they may buy the building at $5 million. It may be worth $15 or $20 million when they're done. So there's a third type of aspect when it comes to syndications.
Right.
Sometimes you can get a couple of these mixed into the same syndication. So it all depends on the individual. There's not just one stop shop or one solution. It really comes back to the individual. If you're young, you may be looking for cash flow. If you're older, you may just be looking for wealth preservation, or you
Mm,
may be looking for tax deductions if you're older, right? Because you're
right.
older, you're making more money, you want to offset and be able to pay less federal tax. So there's a conversation that needs to be had there to be able to fit somebody with the right syndicator. That's why
That
I'm
makes
not
sense.
always the right syndicator for folks, because I may have a building that's only cash flowing. And they're like, gee, Tom, I don't really need the cash, which is great. God bless these people. They don't need the cash. They're looking for either appreciation for down the road in retirement, or they're looking for depreciation to offset their taxes. Does that make
Right.
sense? I hope I
Yeah, no,
explained that
that
well.
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and where so if you're looking to go the syndication route, where does someone start? Is it you just Google syndicates or
Yeah, that's one way to do it. That's one way to do it. What I like to do is, there's a lot of syndicators um, who have YouTube channels. So
okay,
I would actually search YouTube and look for syndicators and see how they present themselves. Are they purely there to sell you something, or are they truly there to help you, right?
mm,
And educate you, right? I'll share
right,
one of the best syndicators I know out there is Kenny McElroy, right? MC
okay,
Companies, Kenny McElroy out of Scottsdale, Arizona, right? He is right, and he, so to speak. I won't say he's a competitor of mine because he's much larger than I probably ever will be, and
right,
and that's okay. But he has his own YouTube channel. He's educating folks out there. It's not just like, hey, the rental market is great. Come give me your money. I mean, that's not what I want to hear from a syndicator. I want to hear from a syndicator, somebody who knows what's going on in the market.
right,
Why are we going? And Kenny understands this beautifully. Why are we trending towards a renter nation? Because
mm,
it's more than just an affordability issue out there with housing. There's so many more factors driving us towards that renter nation. And Kenny gets it, right? So he
right,
sees that vision, 10, 20 years down the road, where what he buys today is going to be more valuable tomorrow. But it's more than just the cash flow of the building. There's
right,
something
right.
going on in society and politics and geopolitically, and yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Well,
so
let's
much.
talk a little bit about that. I mean, the conspiracy theorists will say, okay, this is all part of the Klaus Schwab Economic Forum. You will own nothing and you'll be happy kind of thing. Um, y- why are people opting to rent more than buy? We talked a little bit about the difficulty in getting financing and being in a position to buy. Is that the main thing driving renter nation, or what are some of the other forces?
Yeah, so that is certainly one of them, right? The interest rates being high, and the amount of stock rent housing units on the market is half of what it should be. So
Right.
there's a scarcity, right? There's a
Mm,
scarce, and whenever you have scarcity, like we do in the housing market right now, um, prices go up. It's just supply and demand, right? That's
right.
economics 101. Um,
What
but that's just
why is there scarcity, Tony? It seems to me there should be. I mean, it seemed like there was a big boom in building. I guess before the '09 crash, maybe the or short around that time. It seemed like there was a glut, and then there was a bunch of it just seemed like there was a lot of houses out there, like more houses than almost demand. Am I wrong about that, or did
Yeah,
I miss?
one of the biggest factor is interest rates, because interest rates were so low for so long.
Right,
What that is that took future demand, right? I don't know if I can put it on the screen.
right,
That took future demand and pulled it in. So people who may have been looking
right.
at, gee, I'm going to buy a house in 2025, or I'm going to wait until I'm married in 2028 to buy a house, they
They're
looked
like,
at the
let's
market
buy
and they
now.
said, "Holy cow, I can get a mortgage for 2.75.
Right.
I'm silly not to buy a house." Now, maybe it was more than they like the total like price of the house was more than they wanted to spend, but their monthly mortgage payment would be lower because they got such a killer low interest rate on that home. So that pulled a lot of buyers into the market sooner. And so they consumed a lot of that supply. Okay. And so now it's a matter of trying to refill that pipeline with supply. But there's uncertainty in the market. So these
Mm.
builders, I see it down in Florida. We
Yeah.
live in New Hampshire, but also Florida. So we see both markets, and we see builders in Florida just pulling back. They're not putting in as many
Yeah.
foundations as they were even a year ago because there's uncertainty. Whenever there's uncertainty in the market, it tends to gudge up a little bit.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's
true.
this supply and demand issue going on. But one of the things we look at in terms of being futuristic about why we're going more towards a renter nation, to get into some of the other factors, is we, at least in the United States, we have this huge debt to GDP issue, right? Our we spend as a government, we spend more than the income we bring in,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So our debt to GDP is 128%. So not good. If that
Right.
was your personal finances, you'd be
Yeah.
claiming bankruptcy, right? But
Yeah.
because we're the good old US of A, we get to print money,
Yeah.
which is not necessarily a good thing. We know where that goes. But
Yeah.
anyway, so we have this huge debt problem at the federal level, $33 trillion at the federal level, which means more and more of that income is going to pay interest payments on that debt.
Right.
Okay. More interest is being paid today. Well, what does that do? Well, that leaves less of that income available to go to the states and the cities and towns that need it for whatever programs, education, welfare, uh, different programs, transportation, infrastructure. Less federal money will be available at the state and towns and city level. Well,
Okay.
that money needs to be made up somehow. Those welfare programs will continue to run. Those education systems will need to continue to run. Those infrastructure programs in those states will need to continue to run. The money needs to come from somewhere. If it's not coming from the federal government, it's going to come from property owners, because
Mm.
one of the biggest sources of income at the city, state level is property taxes.
Right.
So right now, we have this housing affordability issue because housing prices are high. Okay. But you're going to see more and more news stories in the future about people not being able to afford homes because property taxes are
Mm.
too high, right?
Interesting.
I I've experienced on my own properties. I have many properties and some have gone up 28%, right? I have one building where it went from a $7,000 property tax to over $10,000 in property, and that's in 1 year. What happens
Wow.
next year? Does it go from 10,000 to 14,000? I mean, you don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So that's gonna become one of the next housing affordability issues, is property tax, and that's one of the
Right.
things. So that's being futuristic, not looking at why we're renter nation today, but why we're gonna be renter nation going forward, because people are gonna be like, "So sure, I can buy that house and maybe I can afford it at this interest rate, but what's the property tax? It's 7,000 today and I can
Yeah.
swing that, but what if it goes to 10,000 next year and
Sure.
14,000? My income, my wages aren't increasing that fast.
Right.
So what do I do?
Yeah. And what do
Take
you
some
do,
rent.
right? Because now you're the landlord, and you've got to pay these taxes. And can your renters afford that much
Yeah,
of a rental increase?
yeah. So
Um,
it impacts rental owners less because we get to amortize that increase over many units.
right.
Right. So, yes, our rents are going up and it's a suck for renters. I get it. And we don't like to increase rents just to increase them. But when you get a big tax bill and you're amortizing it over many, many units, it's easier to swallow that pill.
Sure. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is it's going to, um, the what we can see on the future, and this is, this is going to be real fodder for conspiracy theorists, right? Because what you're telling me is essentially that these ownership syndicates, or just, you talk about the Bill Gates, the Black Rocks,
Mm,
all these companies that are buying up real estate, snapping it up. Um, the environment favors them more than it does the single homeowner or the single renter, right? And so, um, you know, it almost sounds like all the conditions are right to drive people out of like single home ownership. And unless you're part of one of these big conglomerations or
yeah.
owning lots of, it's kind of what I saw happen with farmland in my area, going
Mm,
away from the kind of single family farms that were able to make, produce and make a good living.
yeah.
Now you have to have a co-op, or, in our area, we have a brand of Mennonites called the Hutterites, which are like, well, they're essentially little communist communes, um, where everyone works these giant
Mm,
farms, and that's how they're able to make. No one can compete with them, and you
yeah.
have to have huge tracts of land in order to make money as a farmer. And I'm hearing
Yeah.
the same thing coming from ownership.
Yeah.
And then the other, you start to bring in aspects of, um, there are like elite at the global level talking about
Mm,
the benefits of being a renter always and never owning anything, about just letting big daddy government take care of all your needs and their buddies, the big corporations, about 15-minute cities where we want to reduce your
yep.
carbon footprint and make sure you stay within
Yeah.
the confines of where we deem it's allowable.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
starts to sound pretty scary, Tony.
Well,
Give
yeah,
us some.
Stockholm. I think I just read this morning that Stockholm is no longer going to allow diesel or gas powered vehicles into the city center starting in
Wow.
2025.
Oh boy.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can see how, like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but man, these guys are starting to sound kind of smart to me. But Tony, we've been, I'm gracious that you've given me this much time. We're coming up on an hour. Like, leave us with a little bit of hope here, Tony.
Yeah.
That there's something on the horizon. Do we have to become the man to beat the man? Do we have to become one of these big syndicates, or what is the hope for the little guy?
No, I think the hope is, and I I like social media and some of the things out there, but I also dread it to some degree. So we got to use what we have today for good, and we got to look inward towards ourselves and say, what am I doing to move the needle for myself? Not allowing somebody else to be responsible to move that needle.
Right.
Okay, so we are responsible. We have to work for it. We have to go seek out that education. And with social media, man, it's beautiful. We connected because of social media, right?
Right.
This is great. We can connect with virtually anyone we want because of social media and learn from them, right? So let's use these forces for good, and let's look inward to ourselves and say, how can we move the needle for ourselves? What is our belief system? What are our values? What's the goodness that we bring to the world each and every day? What is the value, like you were talking about, Tim? What's the value? And I chat with a lot of people in terms of value. If you go to work and you do the same thing day after day after day, like Groundhog Day, right? We've all seen that movie.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is the same thing and you're not learning anything new, it's probably time for a change, right?
Mm.
And go and put yourself in a situation where you're going to learn something new and create more value for yourself. Because what you don't want to do is end up to be, 40, 50, 60 years old and all you know how to do, you're like a one trick pony.
Right.
Right? You need to encourage yourself. Government's not gonna do that. They're not gonna force you into that. You need to force yourself into that. You need to create a good community around yourself where people are gonna, not push you down, not drag you down with a lot of negative, media and what's going on out there. You need people who are gonna build you up, and
Right.
that's what I seek out. I go to conferences, I go to networking events, I listen to YouTubes, I talk with smart guys like you, Tim, who encourage me, who make me feel good and give me energy to go do
Yeah.
something different. So that's what I share with people. There's a lot of hope and opportunity in just that. Don't wait for somebody else. Go seek it out yourself.
I
Take
love that,
action.
Tony. What a great way to end it. Take personal responsibility. Guys, quit doom scrolling on social
Yeah.
media. Get together face to face with some people that are going to elevate you, that are doing good things in their own lives, that can teach you some things, that can teach you how to grab freedom in your own life without having to wait for old big brother government to do it for you. Tony, where can people find out more about your message and
Sure.
that sort of thing?
Well, they can find me on YouTube. I have my own YouTube channel called Dirty Boots Capital. You can find me there. I interview a lot of rock stars in the real estate industry and just different folks who are educators, right? It's not all real estate, but people who are out there truly trying to help people do better in their lives. So you can check me out there, Dirty Boots Capital. Outside of that, if people want to reach me directly, they can just shoot me an email, Tony Lopes at dirtybootscapital.com.
Awesome. And folks, those links will be down below. Tony, once again, thanks so much. Enjoyed having you. And we may have to have you back on to do a live stream with some of my audience who are going to have a lot of questions, I'm sure, and want to pick your brain about specifics that we haven't had a chance to get to. There's a lot more I could talk to you about too, about AI and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. So thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. This was a lot of fun. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. You betcha.